Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about some symptoms of organophosphate pesticide poisoning, since this is a pesticide very commonly used in agriculture and in our homes and regular home or hotel or restaurant maintenance activities globally. And this problem I have witnessed in many people in India, in US, in videos of other people from other countries, where I have experienced that some of these symptoms are showing up in the people's lives, but because people are usually unaware of the way in which organophosphate pesticides can be impacting their health, most times people ignore the symptoms, or when people do end up going to their doctors, doctors end up chalking the symptoms to some other health issues. And usually the pesticide poisoning is not something that I found doctors in India or even doctors in US have given credence to. And if I hadn't myself experienced organophosphate pesticide and other pesticide related poisoning on my health myself, twice, once in US and once in India, I wouldn't have also myself realized the significance or the prevalence of this issue in normal common people's lives. And I got really severely sick twice due to pesticide poisoning. One was organophosphate poisoning related in India, and I have also experienced other kinds of pesticide poisoning in India as well as in US. In US, I didn't at that time notice what kind of pesticides were used. All I know is it was due to various pesticides that I got some health issues in India, and I correlated it only almost over a decade later that some of these symptoms that I had experienced back then was related to pesticide exposure that had happened not immediately when I got some of those symptoms, but some of these health repercussions happened sometimes a few months after exposure, sometimes after chronic exposure over a long duration, sometimes after immediate exposure once my body had toxed out. Because what organophosphate pesticides are, they are pesticides that we use very commonly in our homes. Like, say we have a cockroach problem in our home, or people don't want to have a cockroach problem in their home, they will spray these pesticides like Baygon spray, Hit, and many other brands are available. These are the two that are coming at the top of my head in India. All Out. There are so many different brands that have come up with chemical sprays for getting rid of insects and bugs in our home environment. Or if people have homes, in India mostly people live in buildings, but in countries like US, people have homes and large gardens are surrounding their homes. So for garden and lawn maintenance too, most of the times these pesticides are used quite commonly globally everywhere. And not only in our home environment do people use it. These pesticide uses have been prevalent for at least 70-80 years globally, and they are quite commonly used in agriculture globally. It's also quite commonly used by hotels, hospitals, and businesses to keep their business environment pest free, so that they don't have insect infestations, so that people, all of us, get grossed out when we see insects around anywhere in agriculture, to our gardens, to our homes. So to get rid of those pests that we see in our environment, or in order to not see them, most of us have justified using these chemicals, thinking that none of it has long-term health repercussions or health impact on our body. But what happens with these pesticides? Some of them are lipophilic in nature, that is fat soluble. So when we are consuming food, and any food that had been raised in agriculture using pesticides, some trace elements usually remain in the food, especially if mass scale pesticide use has been going on from not just raising the plants, but while transporting the plants or while storage of those plants in different retail chains, whatever is the supply chain of food that happens when the food gets transported from the farmer to our homes or from the farmer to a kitchen from where we are eating our food. Depending on how clean someone had kept the food, or how far away the food was from the exposure to the chemicals, some of our food ends up having trace amounts to large amounts of these pesticides inside them. I have had so many health issues in recent years in India from just buying vegetables from a retailer or vegetables from my local shop, or lentils and other normal food items. I eat mostly vegetarian food, and any of the vegetarian food items that I buy from the stores or from a retailer or from online retailer, wherever I buy my food from or from my local shop, based on from where the food is coming, how the food was stored, how the food was raised, how the food was processed in case of rice and lentils, all of these different places have points of exposure to chemicals on these food that I'm eating. And I went to near cancer levels a few years back, because at the time I was not mindful, I was not careful, I was as unaware, even though I have been educated in this subject for a long time, because I was a pharmacist. I was working as a pharmacist in US for many years. I have done master's degree in pharmacology, which is, and toxicology, which are the study of what these chemicals do in our body. So though theoretically I had this knowledge, practically and theoretically many doctors also have this knowledge, but practically most doctors and most pharmacists or most healthcare professionals do not understand the significance of pesticide poisoning, because most of us think, when we think about poisoning, we think in terms of either farmers getting exposed to it, or people who are doing pest control, they are getting exposed to it while they are regularly working with these chemicals. So farmers, gardeners, pest control people might get exposed to these, and they are the usual suspects who go into the ER or visit a doctor. When they visit a doctor might think, yes, they could have pesticide poisoning, both based on their symptoms and based on the profession they lead. But for most common human beings in the world, when someone goes with a symptom related to pesticide poisoning, it doesn't get correlated to pesticide exposure most times. And it has taken me couple of times of falling sick from pesticide poisoning to finally realize it was pesticide poisoning. That was happening to me, especially when it was direct exposure to pesticide chronically and regularly in my home and building environments, that led me to realize the direct correlation. And then when I went and tried to analyze all my symptoms, analyze what had happened in my life even 10-15 years back, that's when I realized so many of these symptoms were related to pesticide exposure and poisoning related to pesticides. And the reason why I'm making this video is that this has become a chronic global health problem, and a problem which can eventually even lead to cancers, organ damage, organ failures, and death from cardiac arrest, respiratory distress, respiratory arrest, brain cells not functioning, from seizures and things like that. I'm going to list some of the common symptoms first that people can experience initially when they have been exposed to these chemicals, either via some, say your municipality came and sprayed around your city a pesticide, and if they have been doing pest control regularly once a month or something, or your building maintenance has, society maintenance has decided for gardening and for maintenance of society premises, they'll be doing these pesticide spraying regularly, which could be once in a year or once in 6 months. Now in US, that is what happened to me. My exposure happened when my building was doing a couple of buildings where I had lived in different housing societies in US, and different housing societies had their different programs for lawn maintenance, for building maintenance, for some pest control problems that arose in the building premises. So they did some pest control. I myself also did some pest control in my home when I had some pest problems. So all of these combined exposures that happened over a period of 4-5 years while living in US, 4-5 years of conscious knowledge that these pesticides were being used there, because even before I lived there for 13 years, and even before I had these health problems related to pesticides, it's not that pest control wasn't being done in the neighborhood societies. It's just that in the initial 5 to 10 years of living there, 5 to 8 years, I never experienced any perceptible symptoms that were concerning to me. But when the exposure duration had increased a little bit longer, or stronger pest control was done in a specific building, just say in an apartment just below mine, or in the apartment premises all around my apartment, or inside my own apartment, that's when my exposure levels have increased, because now it's within my premises. Now it's more directly in contact via breathing or absorption of the skin area while I'm walking on those premises, and many other ways in which we can absorb this pesticide. Another way we can absorb the pesticide is via our clothes. Say someone has sprayed a pesticide in our neighborhood. They might have sprayed it 15 minutes back, but because most of these sprays are done in the air, what happens to those dispersed air particles? They will slowly fall on the ground. So if say 5 or 10 minutes back in a particular neighborhood they had sprayed this pesticide, and I'm going out for a walk right after they have sprayed it, or while I was walking they started spraying the neighborhood, what happens to the air that is dispersed? Is it just breathed by me? No. This thing that is sprayed in the air, if I'm walking in the environment right near the time when it was sprayed, I will have some particles also get dispersed on my skin. So it gets absorbed via my skin as well. Some of it might have gone into my clothes. Now if I wore that clothes long term, then via my clothes also it will eventually get absorbed into my skin and then inside my body. And there is another way in which it can get absorbed is if we are walking barefoot, or we have open-toed sandals that we are using, or we're wearing flip-flops when we are walking on the road. Some of those dispersed particles that fell on the road, some of it while we are walking might get, it has mixed with the dirt on the road or on the other particulate matter on the road. But because you're wearing open-toed shoes which are open, some of it will also get absorbed via our feet. Then the third thing, if it has been dispersed in a garden, and many people in yoga and other practices are told, or if they want to ground themselves, many people try to walk barefoot on the grass of their neighborhood or of their garden. Now, while walking in pure grass, fresh grass, is a beautiful grounding experience. If that grass and that garden has had regular pesticide spraying done, then it is a toxic experience, because then you're walking on grass that has some past exposure from pesticides, or the ground earth has some pesticide contamination on it, and if you're walking barefoot on those gardens, you're absorbing it via your foot. Now there is another way which most people don't consider, which is what is happening to many of us currently, because this is a practice which most people are unaware of can happen to us. What has happened from any area or city or village of the globe that has used pesticide regularly, if one person hasn't used it, say the whole neighborhood has used it. Say if there is a neighborhood of 100 flats, buildings, and if in this neighborhood with 100 buildings in that small society, if even in those 100 people, even if the society doesn't do pest control, out of those 100 people, say 5 or 10 people have used some pesticide inside their home. After the pesticides were sprayed in their homes, most of us in India are very used to Our homes don't have carpets, so we usually have either tiled floors or wooden floors. Mostly wooden floors are also very rare in India. Most of them are cemented or tiled floors. Now in these tiled floors, we usually swab and mop our floors regularly, daily. Most homes do it. So any pesticide that was sprayed in our homes when our maid or when we are mopping our floors, or anything that was sprayed, if it landed on our tiled surfaces of the windows, or landed on the table surfaces or furniture surfaces, and when we are dusting and cleaning and mopping and swabbing the floors and everything, whatever was dusted away or wiped away using a wet mop or wet cloth, we eventually end up washing those wet mops and wet cloths in the water. So what happens is that cloth or mop that was used for wiping now, or mopping now, after we wash it, any pesticide that was mopped away goes into our drainage system. Now most buildings drainage system, how they are, I don't know, because I am not a structural engineer or a construction engineer. But in any society or any, and I have lived majority of my life in cities like Mumbai, Navi Mumbai, and part of my life in a city like Salt Lake City in Utah. So any city which has a lot of population, density of population there, if even out of thousands of people living in that city, even if 100 people have been using these pesticides, they are going eventually inside our underground water system via the drainage system of that city. Now, is it just going directly to the area where the drainage is throwing away the effluents? No, because if a city has been there for hundreds of years or thousands of years, some of those drainage systems, the pipelines used for draining away sewage from our homes, those pipelines may have cracks in them. That's why some of the drainage could be going directly underneath the underground water tables of any city or village where we live in. So depending on the mass scale use of pesticides in a particular city or a village, the propensity of that area's water systems to be contaminated with pesticides is quite high in most cities. I was recently traveling when I got a little better from my cancer and everything, and I was frustrated with the constant chemical usages in my neighborhood, or by my neighbors, or by my society, or by my local government. I wanted to see were there any other places in India where this pest control problem was not so high, where pesticide related contamination and exposure problems weren't high. So I traveled a lot to different parts of India, but what I found was the same problem persisted in almost every city I have gone to. And the problem of pesticide contamination isn't just via the direct exposure to the chemicals sprayed in our homes or societies, but there are pesticides being sprayed in near the dam systems. I saw in Kerala that pesticides were sprayed there. I went to a very beautiful locality in Kerala with the highest greenery I have seen all over across the different places I visited in India. And despite that area having real high percentage of greenery, I was still having breathing trouble there. Why? Because say I lived in that area for a couple of weeks, and in those couple of weeks, say for 3 days, my lungs are having the most beautiful experience because there's greenery around, there's a lot of oxygen, much more oxygen than what I would get in a city where the ratio of trees are less compared to humanity, and here the ratio of trees were more compared to humanity. But though this was a nice idyllic place where, and it was near a tourist destination where lots of tourists also do travel to, but despite that, their density of population of humans to plants are less. So that should mean that you should have a lot of greenery, lot of oxygen, lot of lung healing, which I got initially when I stayed there for a few days. But their local government uses a lot of pest control, and pesticides are sprayed regularly in the neighborhoods, in the dams. So what is happening is, in that area, when I had visited them, at that time there was some rain also happening. So the days when rain was falling, and the water levels were more higher, underground water levels, because most of these places also use underground water supply, and sometimes they use water supply from the dams. So half of the water comes from their underground water sources, and half of it comes from the local dam. So both these water supplies, when the rain happens, the concentration of pesticide is lowered because more water is present. As a result, the water is consumable. But on the days when there were no rains, but the continuous pesticide spraying is happening, the underground water levels have higher concentration of pesticides, which then people are using that underground water supply or even their dam water supply for drinking, cooking, washing clothes, bathing. So all these activities need water. So now when your underground water supply or your home water supply has contamination with pesticides, you have increased your pesticide exposure from this water. When anytime you are using a pesticide contaminated water for drinking, anytime you're using it for cooking, anytime you're using it for having a bath, anytime you are showering, anytime you're washing your hair, anytime you're washing your clothes, linen, everything. So pesticide contamination related water pollution, which then increases our pesticide exposure in our body, is a global problem that needs to be resolved currently. Otherwise, many people are going to have chronic illnesses that are going to be fatal for them. Many people have been suffering for many years as a consequence of pesticide contamination and exposure from their neighborhoods, not just air, but from their neighborhood water supply as well. It's just that most people are unaware. And when I started doing meditation, I not only had the clinical insights on what was happening to people, and I had a heightened awareness of what are the symptoms of pesticide poisoning I can read on a person when I see them. Like right now, my hair is a little bit looking oilier. The reason why my hair is looking oilier, one is I have been having some scalp issues and health issues from chemicals, because of which I have reduced use of shampoo. So because I don't shampoo my hair that often as I used to earlier, my hair tends to stay oily. But why does our hair become oilier is because, and this is what I had observed when I was I lived in US for 13 years. At that time I would occasionally visit India. Right now I'm currently living again in India. But when I would visit India from US, I had observed that anytime I had to shampoo my hair used to become more oilier in India than in US. And at that time I chalked it out to the tropical climate versus a little bit more drier and temperate climate of Utah. But despite the climate and equatorial position of these two places being slightly different, now I have realized the increased exposure to pesticides in India means that my hair gets more oilier, because it's our body's natural response to counteract the skin irritation we might feel when we are exposed to pesticides. Our body wants to naturally produce a little bit more oil to keep our scalp healthy, to prevent this pesticide from getting absorbed sooner in our body. So as a result, this can happen. Then when pesticide sprays are happening in the air also, at a time also, most of the time those sprays have some oil components to them. So because of which also, if I'm walking on the roads, it can get into my hair. Though I haven't gone out for a walk in the last few days, since they did a recent pesticide spraying in this neighborhood. But There are many factors, but I have observed that my hair gets more oilier when I stay in areas where more pesticide spraying is happening. Now coming back to the common symptoms that I have observed, and I am going to post a couple of videos which shows these people who also have pesticide problems in their health. It's just that people don't realize that they are getting exposed to pesticides. So first, let me just list the clinically known some of the clinically known symptoms. This is not a comprehensive list. There are a lot more symptoms that happen to people when they have pesticide poisoning, from exposure over long term, exposure over a short duration also. Depending on the quality of your health, you get some of these symptoms. Quality of health, quality of food you're eating, the balanced nutrition you could be having in your diet, all of these can impact our pesticide exposure related symptoms. So say in the same neighborhood, if 100 people are getting exposed to the same level and same concentration of pesticide when a municipality is spraying or the society is spraying the neighborhood, out of those 100 people, 5 people might get these symptoms. The rest of them may not even get it immediately. Some of them will get it immediately. Some of them might get it 1 day, 2 day, 100 days after exposure, after enough pesticides from different sources had accumulated in their body. Because when a neighborhood is sprayed, you might get some exposure and get some of these symptoms. But sometimes, say your gardener has sprayed a pesticide 10 days back. Now that pesticide had gone into your underground water supply, which had cross-contaminated your home water supply. So after 10 days, maybe when you're taking a shower, at that time when it came into your water through your water supply in your home, you took a shower. Even after a shower, maybe you didn't get the symptom. You got the symptom after a couple of days of showering in contaminated water, and then you might have finally got a symptom after a month of exposure to these pesticides, if you were, say, healthier than the person who got some of these symptoms immediately after exposure, right? So depending on the health of a person, you would have a different duration when you would get these symptoms. Depending on how much your body has accumulated pesticides, you can get different symptoms. Depending on your body activity levels also, you can have different reaction to different pesticides. Because say when I was in a very few years back, and for almost 15-20 years of my adult life, I have gone to the gym regularly, or gone for walks regularly, or done some home fitness activities like Zumba at home. So doing the minimum 30 minutes to 1 hour of exercise, I would do regularly for at least 5 to 7 days of a week. Sometimes it had been 7 days, but most of the times it was 4-5 days of a week I would be exercising regularly. But when I fell sick from pesticide poisoning, and then I later on realized it was pesticide poisoning. At that time I didn't realize it, but when I got sick and I was slowly lethargy and muscle problems and confusion, these are all symptoms. Let me first go through the symptoms. So when you are getting exposure chronically, like long term, to some pesticide via your food, water, air, clothing, anything, you could have muscle tremors, you could have drowsiness, you could have confusion, you could have agitation, you could have headaches, you could have hallucinations, you could have blurred vision, you could have increased urination and diarrhea, you could have sweating, excess sweating, you could have memory loss, you could have memory problems, you could get seizure, you could have anxiety, you could have agitation, you could have mood changes, you could get angry sooner, or you could have BPD like symptoms, you could have excess anxiety, you could have sleep disturbances, you could have dizziness and drowsiness, and while sleeping you could be drooling saliva out of your mouth, or you could have excess saliva production in your mouth while you're speaking to someone. You could have redness in your eyes, blurry eyes, and tears coming out from your eyes, and most of the time, if we have some slight redness, we'll go to the pharmacy, get a eye irritation medication, or go to a doctor and they will recommend a medication, and we will use some medication for the redness. You could have respiratory trouble, you could have cardiac problems, you could have increased heart rate, sometimes you could have decreased heart rate, because our body is a balancing mechanism. So initially, when immediate exposure of pesticide has increased to a level our body can't process, you will have increased heart rate. But say you're chronically, daily, every day I'm getting exposure to pesticide from some source or the other, and my body has and which is what happened to me. Like initially, when I was having heightened pesticide exposure related health problems, my heart rate would increase higher than the normal anytime I was walking on the roads where pesticides had been sprayed regularly. Anytime I was, and this has started happening to me even though I had been used to going on long 1 hour walks on the Indian roads, and had been doing it for 3-4 years regularly, despite me going for 1 hour walks or half an hour walks on the roads and near the gardens or near a park of where I was staying. Despite doing a regular walk for so long, my lungs had been used to the pesticides. But the thing is, even though my lungs were initially used to these pesticide exposures, after 2-3 years of doing this activity regularly, and also because there were heightened usages that were approved by my society and building or neighbors, what happened was the exposure that was happening normally while I'm walking, it increased when some immediate acute spraying happened. So these toxins just piled on top of each other, and they had accumulated enough near my cardiac system to cause cardiac distress, which was causing my heart to beat rapidly. And when my heart rate was happening, and then slowly my health started deteriorating, and I was having breathing trouble while walking on the roads. I was having muscle problems because I had switched over from eating non-vegetarian food to vegetarian food a few years back. As a result, even though I had switched over to eating vegetarian food, I think I didn't give the appropriate protein supply to my body, and as a result, some muscle weakness started happening, which is what happens to many people. And when muscle weaknesses started happening, and there are some direct impact of these pesticides on different systems in our body, which can cause our body's walking motility and mobility functions to get disrupted, and eventually lead to whatever inside the body disruption that this chemical is doing via different mechanisms and pathways. I won't go into that right now, but if I write an article on it, I will reference it, or if I find an article on it, I'll reference it here later. But basically, I have observed we get muscle weaknesses if, say, and I'll tell you one reason is very common and simple reason why we are having muscle problems and muscle tremors is because these pesticides, if we have been consuming it via food or even via skin absorption, if a lot of it has absorbed and accumulated in our body, it gets accumulated near the fat cells, it gets accumulated and it binds to our smooth muscle cells in our stomach. So many people will also get initially, when our body is toxically exposed to it, will get diarrhea. But say you have been chronically exposed to this pesticide for a long time, then the diarrhea happens because our body wants to eliminate this. Our diarrhea, urination, salivation, sweating, all these symptoms happen because our body wants to eliminate the toxin as soon as possible from our body, because it's toxic to our body's normal health systems from functioning. It prevents our body's normal health systems from functioning. So our body tries to eliminate the toxin as soon as we are exposed to it via sweating or urination or salivation or teary eyes. But when chronically, daily you're getting exposed, or weekly or monthly or yearly you're getting exposed to this pesticide via some source or the other, and for most of us it is almost monthly or weekly exposure via some source or other, especially if we are living in large cities or places where pest control is done regularly. So depending on how much pest control is being done and where in your food supply chain, clothing supply chain, pest control has happened, where in your daily life pest control is happening, your exposure levels will vary and the health impact varies. But when enough pesticide has accumulated in my body, it can get accumulated in the smooth muscle cells of respiratory tract, cardiac muscles, stomach muscles, intestinal muscles. So as a result, when enough of this pesticide has accumulated in our body, the muscular function gets disrupted. And when the muscular function of peristalsis get disrupted, what is happening is food is getting stored long term in our stomach. And when food is getting stored long term in our stomach and we are getting, say, constipation problems, what do people usually do? They will take medication for eliminating the constipation. So as a result, what is happening then? The constipation that happened in your stomach, which had accumulated the food in your gut and it was not moving down because the muscles had not contracted. Now what happens is, you take a medicine, all the food you had consumed 2-3 days back that didn't get digested, that didn't get absorbed, now just gets passed away from your body. So say you are the healthiest eater in the world, say you're eating the most balanced diet in the world. Even if you eat the most balanced diet, if none of that balanced food is getting absorbed by your body because of the interference from these chemicals inside your body and it interfering with your normal biological functioning, now even if you ate the most healthy food in the body, most nutritious and balanced diet, most of the diet is not getting absorbed, most of the nutrition is getting wasted because your food is impacted in your stomach. Even if you didn't take a medicine for constipation, most of the food is not getting absorbed for some reason or other because of the biochemical disruption caused by these pesticides. As a result, even if you ate a high protein diet, your proteins may not be getting absorbed by your body and you may have muscle weaknesses, muscle tremors. If these pesticides were exposed, you had sprayed it on your garden and you're walking on your garden wearing flip-flops, they've absorbed on your feet. And after the feet, does it stay in the feet? No, because of the blood supply, it will go to your legs also. So as a result, also muscle tremors and muscle weakness happens because they disrupt some functions there. So because of which, and especially if you have, say, magnesium deficiency going on or other kinds of deficiencies also happening in your body as a result of the pesticide exposure or as a result of poor diet and poor nutrition, again, different symptoms will arise in your body. So in the videos that I have referenced here, I saw this video of this gentleman who had fallen down and this lady picked him up and he was all woozy and seemed like he had some concussion as a result of his fall. But other than that also, the way he was walking and the way his body looks, it's a classic symptom of pesticide poisoning. His muscles, if you will look, his hands look a little thinner, whereas here it looks like he has fat. His abdominal area also has a lot of fat, but his legs are thinner. Now this is a symptom I have observed in many long-term pesticide exposed patients, especially elderly, low income people in living moderately frugal life. We don't usually think about going and buying organic food, going and buying clean, chemical free, pesticide free food. Most people, 90% of the world's population, doesn't focus on food, whether it is, what is the source of food, whether it's clean food, chemical free, pesticide free. So 90% of the world doesn't care what food we are getting. We go to the supermarket, buy the food that we are getting. We try to buy the cheapest food. Most of the time, the cheapest food, the foods on sale, are foods I have observed that have sometimes some more chemical contaminations in them, and instead of recalling those foods or doing something like that, they end up selling it for cheap instead. And most people don't report it. Most countries also don't have systems to report chemical poisoning or food poisoning from food sources, or even though there might be laws against it for food contamination, like India also has FDA related guidelines, US also has FDA guidelines. Despite that, because this problem is so prevalent, so common, most times we are not aware of the level of chemical contaminations and from food that we are consuming. But it is a regular thing that has happened to me in US also and in India also, and I have seen so many elderly people in the US in some of these videos who have pesticide poisoning related health symptoms, and not just elderly, even middle age to old age. When people's activity levels go down, that's when more pesticides keep accumulating in the body, because these are fat soluble chemicals, and they accumulate along with the fat inside our body. And many people, those who have the pesticide accumulation in their body, they will either have it in their stomach area, hips, thighs, arms, chest. These are all the common areas of anyone who has struggled with weight will know. These are the common fat accumulation areas for anyone, from a man to a woman. In men, I have mostly observed that they will have a big gut, even if they're not drinking beer, even if they don't consume alcohol, they will have this big gut when they have pesticide exposure. And I haven't just seen it in US, I've seen it in people in Africa, people in India. So whatever, I watch a lot of online videos, and when I'm watching the videos, sometimes I analyze a person's health status. So I have referenced to elderly people here in this video, or I might reference more if I find those videos which I had observed a few months back where people have had pesticide exposure. I've also referenced a video of an Indian girl who lives in Africa, and I felt she is having pesticide poisoning. One, because of the way she interacted in the video. Secondly, because I also have a sixth sense that can sometimes detect pesticide poisoning or some other health problems in other people, even if I have not met them personally. So, and in that video of hers, her mom had prepared these sambar dals and very yummy South Indian dishes. And in my recent trip to Kerala, where I had seen water contamination related pesticide poisoning happening there, one major thing that I was having a trouble explaining to these people was because they, having had a very natural lifestyle in the area where they live, where this family, they run a bed and breakfast like place, and their home itself is where guests come and stay. They make really good authentic South Indian food and cuisine, and the cuisine tastes amazing. But it can only taste amazing, and it can only be, and it is very nutritious and balanced food and diet, because they live closer to nature. They have a very good and they have a good supply of their home was in a plantation like area where they get good supply of food from their plantation, as well as they buy food from the market. Now the food in their plantation, when people have done farming and raised plants and trees and vegetables and fruits in their own gardens and plantations for many decades and centuries, it is true that if you have natural supply of food, it should be healthy, and it will be the healthiest food possible for you. But if your underground water supply or the rainfall is contaminated with pesticides and other chemicals, what happens is those chemicals are going into your food as well. And if you have been using your underground water supply or contaminated water for cooking your food, now any food that you have cooked using that water also is double contaminated. One, from direct exposure to the chemicals, and second, from when the food is getting cooked. So this lady's video, and in my own experience also this happened to me, when sambar, which is a very delicious food, nutritious food, when we are unhealthy, when we are having fever or some disease, or we're not feeling well, sambar is a kind of soul food. It's a soup like food. So soups are generally the soul food for most people globally around the world when they are sick. But this soup, that is soul food, if it is not prepared in water that is completely pure H2O, it can destroy the quality of the food you're eating, and in fact it will make you sicker than making you feel healthy. So if you've drunk a soup which has been cooked in pesticide contaminated water, you will fall sick. If you made coffee using pesticide contaminated water, you will fall sick. If you made coffee using pesticide contaminated milk or creamer or coffee beans, then also you will fall sick. If you made any food, rice, in Indians use rice, wheat, vegetables, meat products, whatever we cook. Water is an important element of cooking in most cultures, and anytime we are cooking any food using water, if that water is contaminated, you are adding another element of exposure to your body, which will end up making you feel sick. And in this video I saw this lady looking really tired while she was walking with her husband. They hadn't done this walking in a few years after she had the baby, so it might have been like a 1 year gap, 1.5 year gap that they had before they went on these long walks. So if their neighborhood had a lot of pesticides being sprayed in their neighborhood, the pesticide problem arises from that for her. Then after drinking coffee, I felt she was looking very drowsy and tired. Their sambar and other food that was being prepared in the kitchen, I felt had pesticide contamination via the sixth sense ability that I have, which people may or may not believe, that's up to you. But her physical body is also the way in which her body's, if you look at her past videos and current videos, you will see she has accumulated fat in certain areas of her body. Now, depending on genetic predisposition, we will accumulate fat in particular areas of our body, that is true. But wherever the fat has accumulated in our body, the second element to it is that is the area where the pesticide is also accumulating in your body. So if you don't do regular exercises, the pesticide continues to be in your body, circulate in your body, and disrupt different body functions. If you are doing exercise after a long gap of not exercising, actually you should slowly ramp up your exercises. You shouldn't go from no activity to a 1 hour long walk, because that will end up making you feel tired. And in that video she was telling her husband that she feels like she needs milk. Now she's a breastfeeding mom, so the reason why her body was telling her she needs milk is another thing that these pesticides can do is it can disrupt many metabolic functions, leading to cancers of the bones. But you don't get bone cancer the first day you are exposed to a pesticide. You will get bone cancer or any kind of other cancer, blood cancer and organ damage related cancers, 10 years, 5 years, depending on a time span of exposure and degree of exposure, and also your health condition, you can get cancers eventually in life. So this bone aches and pain problem I have experienced. I didn't realize it was because of pesticide exposure that my bones are so weak, but my bones are weak and I get bone aches and pains. I get tiredness, and this woman was feeling tired because she is a breastfeeding mom, so majority of her nutrition is going to the baby. So she needs to increase her nutritional uptake of whatever things the baby will use more from her. So that's why she's feeling she needs more calcium, and hence she is saying she needs to drink more milk, which is true. Intuitively God is giving her the insight, or the universe is sending her the insight, she needs milk. But if that milk is contaminated, again there is a problem. If her body is not detoxed from the pesticide exposure that is happening to her regularly, then also there will be interference in the absorption of those nutrients in her body. If this pesticide has accumulated in our blood, then it impacts our blood's normal function also, and eventually can lead to first it will show up as anemia like symptoms, and that is what doctors have told me when I have gone to the doctor, that you have anemia. So they've given me tablets for anemia, looking at my face or health, but they've not believed when I have there was a point of time when I had I have only listed about 21 symptoms here of pesticide poisoning. There are more symptoms than this, and I had a list of almost 40 symptoms that pesticides can cause in someone's body when you have pesticide poisoning. Out of those 40 symptoms, over the time of exposure of a few years to these pesticides, I had experienced, not at the same time, not on today when I'm going to the doctor, or this month or this week when I went to the doctor, that I had these symptoms, but over the span of 3-4 years of exposure, at least 35 of those 40 symptoms I had in my body. I experienced it one time or the other in the duration of those 3-4 years of exposure. And only when I was in severe health crisis, when I was not able to manage my distress, I'd gone to the doctor. But the doctor couldn't do anything. She didn't even believe that it was pesticide poisoning. She wasn't even ready to call the poison control helpline that this city has, just because she was not believing my education over hers. I can't do anything about a doctor not believing my education over hers. I can't even do anything if you don't believe anything I have said in this video. But it is actually the truth. These people have listed in this video all have pesticide poisoning. The pesticide poisoning is just manifesting in a different way for each of them. Whether they have pesticide poisoning from the same pesticide or a different chemical, I think it's majorly the same chemical, but because they live in different cities and different parts of the world, part of their poisoning could have different chemicals involved in their development of their symptoms. So if people become aware that they are having these health issues that I have listed here, I'll post a link of the article from which I took some of these symptoms, but honestly many of these symptoms, of these 21 symptoms also, there were immediate, some of these symptoms I experienced immediately, like 5-6 of these symptoms I had experienced immediately when my exposure to pesticides were low grade and I had just come back from US. I had experienced some of these symptoms, and then after living in India for 1-2 years, then I experienced a few more of these symptoms. After having lived here for a few more years, after having a longer term exposure to some of these pesticides, and then I had, out of these 21 symptoms, maybe like 17-18 of them have resonated for me, that I had those symptoms, some of them cropping up when I was in the most severe and distressed phase of my life, which lasted for about at least 2-3 years. I got frustrated seeing a couple of different doctors, and finally I did my own research, and only after doing research also I went and saw a few doctors. But because there was no right resolution from them, the only way I have managed to reverse some of my symptoms is by reducing exposure to pesticides, by drinking cleaner water. If I find that during summertime especially, the water supply of our buildings and housing societies get more concentrated with the pesticides. As a result, during those seasons, I get more symptoms. So during summertime, I try to drink more cleaner bottled water like this, and also sometimes shower with bottled water. I have taken lots and lots of different individual specific precautions to reduce my exposure to them. I am pretty sure my body still has some pesticides. If I do a blood test, whether they will show up or not, I don't know. They might show up, but even getting a doctor to write me that test is a pain in India. There's one simple test. Not many labs in India do this test for organophosphate pesticide poisoning test. I have found only one lab in Mumbai who does it, but for that lab needs a doctor's prescription. If I don't find a doctor to give me that prescription to tell that you may have this pesticide poisoning and we want to test you for it, just because the doctor has not given the diagnosis doesn't mean that my healthcare problems disappear. Every time someone sprays the neighborhood with a pesticide or their homes with a pesticide, and I am their neighbor walking down the neighborhood, and nowadays pesticides are also used in painting. So if say a building is doing their painting and they're painting the stairwells and the pathways, or a garden's fence is repainted, or a garden bench is painted, whatever paint supply people use nowadays, sometimes because of whatever regulation changes, currently I have observed in Mumbai that pesticides are added even on paint supply. So when you are using paint laced with pesticide, then your home walls or your garden walls or your stairwell walls, depending on where the painting has happened, is now laced with a pesticide layer, which increases my breathing distress every time I pass down those stairs, pass down those homes. I visited my uncle and aunt who did a renovation in their home, and their homes, certain parts of their homes had more pesticide than other parts. But I just literally couldn't. Like, I visited them for 3-4 hours, not 3-4 hours. We visited them for an hour and a half. And usually I would visit them for longer time. I would even stay in their homes for longer time. But in that 1.5 hour of visit also, I couldn't stay indoors for more than 20 minutes because I was feeling so suffocated from the pesticide on their walls. That painting that had been done months before I visited them, even then, that trace amount of pesticides on the walls were increasing my breathing distress because my body is already in a distress system and I am still in a precancerous stage, which won't go away if the pesticides don't go away from pesticide exposure doesn't go away. It's like the cancer that is developing in my body, it is in a precancerous stage. Slowly cancer is developing as more and more pesticide exposure is happening. 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line, if this pesticide exposure continues, I will get that cancer. But until the time I get a cancer diagnosis doesn't mean that the disease is not developing in my body. Because I have literally had a family member who suffered breathing problems for many years, very similar to my breathing problems. He's not even genetically related to me. And he doesn't even live in the same city as me. We're both just Bengalis living in 2 different parts of India. His age is also 30 years old. He was older than me. Even then, before he died, he got a cancer diagnosis a month before he died. He was getting treated for that cancer. But even though he was getting treated for the cancer, he eventually died of a cardiac arrest. And the thing is, before he got the cancer diagnosis, for 3-4 years he had breathing distress problems. They did multiple tests. They couldn't find out what was wrong with him in the first 2 years. Then eventually they found out that he had TB. So they had treated him 1 year for TB, and he was TB free for 1 year. But though he was, they initially thought that's why that this breathing problem was stemming from TB. So though he had TB and he got treated for TB for 1 year and he was free of TB, his breathing distress problem hadn't disappeared. And then they again did a second round of investigation a year after his TB treatment things had been done. He again went to the doctor, because another thing is, what doctors don't realize is patients are very patient. That's why they are called patient. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just joking here, but patients are indeed patient, because I have taken 3-4 years to figure out what was going on wrong with my body. In that 3-4 years, it was stage by stage what was going wrong, because I just didn't have pre-cancerous stage. I was having other health problems also at the same time, because we are not a textbook that when I am reading about a disease, I compartmentalize the disease according to, say, organ systems or according to the disease chapter. So there will be a chapter of cancer I will study. There will be a chapter about blood diseases I might study. There is a chapter of cardiac diseases I will study. There is a chapter of lung diseases I will study. There is a chapter of gastrointestinal diseases I am studying. So as a student of this subject of pharmacology, I have studied different subjects based on different body parts which have been divided into chapters. But as a human being who is actually experiencing this disease, my lung disease, cardiac disease, respiratory illness, blood illness, bone illness, they're all happening at the same time. Okay, so if organophosphate poisoning is causing a health impact in my lungs, cardiac system, blood, bones, I might have studied about what this pesticide does to different parts of the body in different chapters. I might have even studied in one chapter about pesticide poisoning. But until I correlate and compile the whole data into one structured diagnosis, it doesn't add up. And if I go to a cardiologist, and cardiologist is only looking at my heart and not looking at any other organ system problems, which is what happened. I went to a cardiologist. He just looked at the cardiac problems and gave me a clean bill of health, even though I was having some problems there. And I will post a different video on this. But main thing is, sometimes doctors are just looking at one part of the body. Sometimes they might be looking at the whole body also, if they are an internal medicine doctor or a general physician. But despite that, most doctors don't realize if someone has cancer or if someone has long-term chronic poisoning, their symptoms will be jumbled up. They will have multiple organ related dysfunctions that could be happening with their body, especially if their exposure to pesticides were different kinds of pesticides from different sources and things like that. So every patient is very different, but no patient will be getting the same symptom when you have, or even two patients of pesticide poisoning living in the same house. Like, I will post a video and people might think I'm judging these people, but I'm not judging them. In that video of an elderly person who has Alzheimer's, which is a memory dysfunction problem, which can also arise from pesticide poisoning. He has multiple other symptoms of pesticide poisoning in his body, like muscle weakness. He had a fall recently. He had some tumors and other skin related health issues also going on, which can also accumulate when pesticide poisoning is happening. He had the same gut problem and small thin muscles and hands. So similar kind of health issue, and he is a man living in a different city than the other elderly man. Despite that, they both have some similar symptoms, some different symptoms. And he's an elderly person, 90 plus years of age, living with his son and his wife, who are maybe 50 years of age, middle-aged people. Even they have pesticide poisoning problem from the pesticides in their local environment and water supply, is what I presume. Food, water and air is where their pesticide contamination is happening from. Now, they also have some symptoms like a little bit of agitation in their voice when they speak, a little bit of anxiety when they speak. So these things, though very subtle, are actually beginning signs of pesticide poisoning, which now they are 50 years of age. Now it is very minor and subtle symptom, but by the time they become 70, 80, 90, these symptoms will escalate, and they will also end up having similar health issues as the father who has had some health issues. At least his son will have very similar or 50% similar health issues as his father, but and which people will chalk out to genetics. But part of it is genetics, and part of it is also the same food, water, clothing, contamination related exposures that you have had, and same kind of diet and other lifestyle choices that have impacted your health over time. I hope this video made sense. If you have any questions, please drop a comment. It's a long video, but for education purposes and for information purposes, I can't make a short video describing a global, massive, large scale problem that's not just unfolding in one country, one city, but it's unfolding globally. And it is also part of the reason why COVID also happened, or long COVID is happening. And I think I've posted a video on this, but I'll try to post a shorter video on cancer and shorter video on COVID next. And if you have any other questions, please drop a comment. If you feel you have pesticide poisoning going on, best is to, if you are in US or a developed country, you may have higher chances of getting the cure for it. But irrespective of you living in a developed country or developing country, main problem is people have to stop using pesticide in their regular lives, start becoming mindful of the quality of food, water, air, clothing, other things that they're doing in their daily lives that are impacting their overall health. If you want to reduce the aging related healthcare costs, the only way you can reduce the aging related healthcare costs or simple falls like this elderly man had, these two elderly men, they both fell. One had a son who was walking with him, that's why his status wasn't as bad, but this other elderly man fell for many minutes before anyone helped him get up, because he likely lives alone, or he might have an elderly spouse who decided maybe my husband is doing something in the garden or something. So we don't know his history, whether he's living alone or he has other people living with him. But it's not just a problem with the elderly, middle-aged people like me. I'm 40 plus and middle age, but my health issues with pesticide problems started when I was in my 30s. It's just that I didn't realize it was a pesticide poisoning problem, and most doctors also don't realize it. But doctors have to realize it, governments also have to realize it, people have to realize it, because if you don't stop using pesticides, its health repercussions and impact on your body is not going to stop. It's just going to escalate to a level where people will be confused, like, what is happening, why am I getting multiple diseases? Or most times people chalk it out to old age problem, but I'm not an elderly person. But despite that, I had multiple health issues that impact the elderly, and one reason was that my diet was not that clean. Now I'm trying to eat, like, my diet was clean in terms of I was eating vegetarian food, but now I have to make it chemical free food, organic food, more fresher food, and not just clean food, because I have done the clean food stage also. But now then I found out it was not just the lack of clean food that was causing the health issue, but lack of clean food sources and lack of clean water to prepare the food. So if I have the best quality organic food in my home, but my water supply is contaminated and I don't have access to good water, again I'm back to square one, which is what happened when I went to Kerala. I've written on this in my Facebook page. Some of these things I've also written on my LinkedIn page. If people want to know further about it, you can do that, your own research. But in short, if you want good health, you need to start doing clean eating, clean living, and chemical free lifestyle choices. I hope it helped you, and thank you for watching.